this house actually has a very distinct architectural style known as Monterey Colonial. So that is the fusion of the East Coast. So the East Coast influence, which is where you have the gable, the wraparound wooden porches, that East Coast architectural influence fused together with the existing California Adobe architecture created its own style, its own specific style invented right here in Monterey County. So keep in mind that this area it really is considered to be the most stable form of or center of government on the entire west coast of this continent. Keeping in mind that throughout it was the capital of Alta California, throughout the Spanish colonial era, the Mexican Republic, early California territorial government, and finally Monterey being the first capital of California under statehood, shortly before the capital of California was moved to Benicia, and then to San Jose, and then finally to Sacramento. This is all based on the population. Most of the population in those days were in the northern part of the state, central and northern part of the state, due to all of those who came here for the gold rush. So those are really the main logistics of why Monterey actually lost the capital. So here, this has always been on the property. This is an 80-million-year-old giant clamshell.
No, it's not. That's
It is.
huge.
So this evidences the fact that all of this was underwater at one time, and the waters were warm enough to actually sustain or be responsible for creating these giant clams. Imagine how many cups of clam chowder you could have with something like that. We have our set of Spanish colonial era grinding stones, mill grinding stones that obviously would have been responsible for grinding wheat into flour. Moving right along, you'll note the second story of this house. So what you're looking at behind that door would have been the grain loft. Okay, so the first adobe that was built by this family was built a couple miles that way on their property, and the first winter they discovered they had actually built on a floodplain. So there were problems for the family, but also in their original adobe, they had their grain storage on the first floor. The rats, which were and remain an issue here in the Salinas Valley, came in, contaminated their wheat supply, their grain supply, and essentially the family starved that winter. So the very next spring, they went and searched on their property for certain geographical features and chose this very nice area. It's a nice promenade, elevated, and this is where they built their adobe. But so you'll note at the base of the door, you'll note the grooves at the base of the door. That shows you that the only way of ingress and egress from the grain loft was from the ladder. Now also, the boys of the family slept in the grain loft on the sacks of grain. That's how the story on the sacks of grain. That's how the story goes. But I'm certain they probably had beds. Anyway, now does anybody have any questions before we go in? The all-purpose room for family gatherings and also receiving visitors as well. So again, a multi-purpose room. Consider it to be a living room. And you'll please look around and see that we've actually furnished this room, in fact, this house, in a living history style, reflecting living conditions of the 1850s. So many of the artifacts in this house actually were in the house a very long time ago, left the house, and slowly but surely articles that were in this house 100, 120 years ago are returning to us. The same phenomenon is actually happening with the Queen's Palace in Honolulu, Hawaii. Someone actually should do a study on that. It's very interesting. I digress. Anyway, so from 1844 to 1870, this house was one room. It was just a one-room house. And so finally, in 1870, Boronda actually added these wall partitions. So I should have noted when we first came in that among many things, so Boronda, who, if you please look at this image right here, this is the builder of the house, Jose Eusebio Boronda. So Boronda was a lumberman. Quite a bit of his lumber built Mexican Republic, Monterey. And he was also a ranchero. He was also well known for capturing bears, the bull and bear fights at Monterey.
So they have AC.
That's a 1973 edition. Actually, that room that I was in briefly before returning to you, that used to be a main so to birth animals during wintertime. But the Historical Society acquired the property shortly after it did. It actually put a furnace in that room. The reason why we keep this house fairly warm, well, 62 degrees, which stays off the humidity. So in order to keep it in good condition. Oh, hello, welcome. I'm James. I am the director. Welcome. Yes. So I think I'll have you all mill around here just for a couple of minutes, and then we'll proceed. Russia, you're not at the top of the food chain. There's something bigger than you out there that, depending on how hungry it is and how desperate it is, could spell trouble for you. Again, this evidences the fact that in those early days, not only were the settlers here fighting the elements, trying to build a life of civility, but they had to worry about literally being someone's tasty treat. And so again, it's the reality of living was very, very harsh, very different than what we have today. So couple that in with lack of good nutrition, infant mortality. If you lived to be 10 in those days, you were lucky. So, and that's clearly evidenced by the genealogical chart here. It clearly shows you the grim reality of infant mortality. So, why don't we proceed into the dining room? And feel free to ask any questions as you go. So I was very careful to say this was the dining room because only very light meal preparation was done here. So we're talking about grinding corn with the molcajete, the mortar and pestle, or the metate to use for the tortillas and whatnot. And maybe a light stew would have been done here. All of the heavy cooking, the roasting of meats, was done in a ramada, so a lean-to shed approximately 40 feet away from here. Okay, so it's very important to do that. Now, between 1994 and 1998, I worked with a local group called the Colonial Dames of America Monterey chapter in order to fully research historical house interiors from the 1850s, so that we can actually replicate a historical house interior from that time period. So, in putting together the exhibit plan and the tangible exhibits themselves, it wasn't just about our going into our collections, surveying our collections, picking and choosing, oh, this looks good, that looks good. We actually employed scientific fact and finding, as evidenced by this right here. So, this is the blue willow pattern. Now, one of the first things that the Historical Society did in 1972 when it acquired the house was bring in an archaeologist who conducted reconnaissance and excavation. As a result of the excavation, the archaeologist found quite a few bits and pieces of this particular pattern. So we know that the family actually ate off of this pattern. So again, this is where we employ that scientific analysis and those scientific findings in order to do things like set the table appropriately. Now, they're still making this. I got this at Cost Plus in 1998, so you can still find this kind of thing. Anyway, so also, well, what you can't see behind me, you can have a little peek though, as time allows. That area right there, there's a small little hole, and you know, you can look at it. There's just a small little hole in there, and that would have lifted up. This is a panel here, and this is where the family would have kept their perishables.
Their pantry.
Yes. And another while we're in here, it's in here. This is a trousseau, which is more or less a marriage trunk. One of Boronda's daughters, Maria, married into a French family, the Labrador family. And so Boronda actually made this trousseau for his daughter, for her marriage. And in those days, they would have filled it up with silks and silver and precious things as a dowry, as it were, for the marriage.
Do you know a date on that?
This is, I want to say this is about 1870.
This is the real one?
Yes.
Wow.
And what's interesting about this, you'll see this is cowhide. This is what we call a California banknote. And the reason why we call it a California banknote is that during the Mexican Republic era, very little script or currency traded hands. It was mostly a system of trade and barter. So in those days, a California hide, this hide, would have been worth $1 in trade at the port of Monterey. So, but also the fact that his daughter Maria married into a Labrador family. A lot of people think that California was homogenous, culturally homogenous, until fairly recently. In fact, it wasn't. Not at all, as evidenced by Spanish family marrying into French families. So another one of their daughters actually married into another French family, the Pombert family. Both of the Labrador and Pombert family having been associated with Moss Landing. I mean Castroville, I'm sorry. Yes. Does anybody have any questions?
It's made, so it's wood, it's made of wood and it's wrapped in cowhide?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, after the Historical Society acquired the property, it did another thing. It brought out an architectural historian from the Smithsonian Institution. After extensive research, the architectural historian stated that this house is one of the most historically intact of its kind in the state of California.
Oh, wow.
From that time period. So, any questions before we go to the other camera? So this is the bedroom. Now a couple of the daughters would have slept here. The parents would have slept here, as evidenced by the privacy sheets and whatnot. There are certain amazing artifacts in here. 2 trunks from the Spanish colonial era, purportedly brought by Boronda's father, Manuel Boronda, who was one of the advisors to Padre or Santo Junipero Serra. Okay. So again, very authentic for the 1850s. Now, every family has within it one or a small collection of artifacts that have just kept the family together through time, that are actually iconic to the family. This, the Sacred Heart of Jesus statue, actually, that is one of the most iconic and important artifacts of the Boronda family. We have members from the Boronda family coming as far away as Costa Rica to pray to this statue. So the legend behind it, and I've been told by many people that actually remember Juanita. Juanita wanted to become a nun, but familial obligations, she married Francisco Boronda, one of the sons of Jose Eusebio Boronda. And so, but still, she was very, very religious, very holy, and it is said by family members, every single prayer she prayed came true. So, normally I don't allow people to touch artifacts, but I make an exception when it comes to this particular statue. So, does anybody have any questions? There's still a lot of ground to cover.
Your name's up on there? Is it?
Yes.
Okay, alright, nice. Thank you. And what was the time period that was the first?
It's about 1880.
1880?
Wow. Has the color been touched up at all? Or-
Oh no, it's in its original condition. Yes.
Wow. How cool.
All right. We're actually, this is where you get your hideout. And if I'm not using the appropriate nomenclature, let me know. I'm not that good when it comes to saddles, actually. Then the seat actually becomes lower during the American period. You'll also note we have several side saddles. So the side saddles actually came to this area when with the East Coast influence. Traditionally, during the Spanish colonial and Mexican Republic era, the women would ride the saddles just like a man would. So when these side saddles were brought here to the West Coast, and some of the California women bought into that idea, you know, there are countless stories of tragic accidents, women dying, women being debilitated, all in the name of riding side saddle. So that, I don't think anyone has done a study on that, and that would be actually a very interesting sociological study in itself.
I'll sit right here.
Well, you can see the built now, depending upon your age. This was built so that first graders were over here, then as time went on.
Oh, videotape a little bit of the interior.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, actually. Yeah. I've been just trying to notice there was a information ago, so I can go back and take pictures of those items.
What are these for?
Well, those are stops. Yeah, they're morbid. So when you turn them on, depending upon it's time and what you want to
I
do.
didn't come in here.
This is actually this is the original school. Again, as I mentioned, we went from the first grade to the 8th grade. So obviously the little people were over here, and the big people were over here. And one teacher taught all 8 grades.
That one's.
No. No. I mean, now, if you try to do it, it would be like, you know, just horrible. The kids then were a little bit better behaved. So let's say she wanted to teach the 3rd graders math and arithmetic. She had workbooks and things for the little ones to work on, and for the big kids. So about 30 minutes was spent for about each group. Now sometimes they had, you know, they had a whole bunch of 1st graders and no 8th graders, and sometimes it was vice versa. We started at 8. There was no bathroom facility, so they had to do that outside. We started at 8 and then went home at 3. They had about a 30-minute break outside to play, and then they came back in. And they did that from September to June.
Wow.
They do it like 5 days a week?
Yes.
Like, you know?
Yes. And I mean, these apparently, obviously I wasn't with, but apparently, I mean, kids were free, no occasions. So the little ones, if they got restless, you know, she made sure that they weren't restless for very long. And they had things to draw and reading and that type of thing.
Got the wiggles out.
Pardon me?
They got the wiggles out.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Do they ever have like school tours come through here? And
We've had one.
okay.
And it was interesting because it was a group of folks that actually where this building originally had been housed, which was in the northern part of the county.
Where was that? Where was it originally?
It was actually the real school that they do is a regular building.
Were they taught how to cook in here too?
No.
Oh.
They may have been, but that's not really. I thought what was kind of interesting, these are the rules for teachers. And this was done before or after school session. This is a teacher now. Okay, this is in the 1800s, 1900s. My aunt schools. You wash the windows, you clean the classroom with soap and water, once a week. Okay. You check the outhouses. Well, that must have been fun. Plenty of old catalogs are available at school board office. That's what they use for toilet paper. Apparel, forbidden wear in public at all times. Women, you can't wear a bathing costume. Bloomers for cycling. Skirts slit to expose ankles, or bustle extension over 10 inches. None of that you can wear. None of it. Men, detachable collar and necktie removed from the shirt. Shirt sleeves unlinked and rolled. Hair closely cropped unless bald or have disease of the scalp.
Wow.
There you go. So there wasn't a whole lot of fun going on here. Then this is cause for dismissal notice for the teachers. Majority of the teachers were actually women. Smoking of cigarettes, uses of spirits, frequenting of pool or public dance halls, that's probably the guys, marriage or other, I don't know what, unseemly behavior by women teachers, I mean, it says marriage or other unseemly behavior, and joining of any feminist movement such as the suffragettes. And this was actually created in September of 1886.
Things have changed a little, huh?
Well, I would say my aunt taught, this was in the 40s and 50s, and she taught up in Northern California. It was very much similar to what they did in 1886. Another thing that's kind of interesting is if all of you can have a chance to just very quickly go through this binder, because this is it's called the Lagunita School, okay? And this is just some information about from the present to the past, and it shows pictures of. Okay,
Thank you.
just go through it really kind of quickly, because you see, pictures of kids that were actually went to school here, and then from here they would go to high schools.
Where was their high school at?
I think it was not North High, but I think it was in Salinas somewhere.
And this is a picture of the actual kids who attended.
Yeah. This one, let me see if I can find. Here's a page that will give you a little bit more information. So it had the kids' names, and then
That's how she took attendance?
yes.
Wow.
But you have to remember things were completely different.
Oh, yeah.
The teacher was God or goddess, and you just didn't argue with them. And if you did, you got kicked out, and your parents beat you up, and you just didn't come back.
Involved here, 3 principal restoration agents. One, he was retired, but he owned a water company in the Alisal, East Salinas. The other one was a retired farmer. Another one was a retired banker. So it was those 3 gentlemen that actually restored this house from the ground up.
Keep going.
No.
Okay.
We haven't gotten to the cool stuff yet?
We have agricultural implements here in this yard dating all the way back to the late 1890s. Of course.
When it comes to like the agricultural history, have you heard of like the Borges family?
Oh yes.
by chance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was wondering because I'm like his direct descendant.
Are
So
you really?
I've been looking for information on them, and I was looking at all of this kind of thing.
Oh yeah, no, we can help you out on that.
Okay,
Most
okay.
certainly,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. This tractor was purportedly used to plant the first strawberry crop in the county of Monterey, 1921, 1922. As the William Weeks House. It is an 1897 Queen Anne Victorian house. Now, again, had the Historical Society not acquired this house in May of 1990, originally located at the corner of Soledad and John Streets in Monterey, had we not acquired it, it would have been yet another historical architectural casualty in the city of Salinas. So, in order to relocate it, we actually had the house split in half. Okay, and we had professional house mover relocated. But you must understand the landscape, the elevations, or the topography of this campus in that time period was very, very much different than it is today. For example, it was a little steeper coming in at the top gate there. And so we almost lost half the house as a result on its way down. I'll never forget that day actually. So right now this house is in the midst of being restored. We have all of the silver, the art, the crystal, the china, the finery, the furniture to furnish it in high Victorian style. Now, what's very important about this house is that its architect, his name was William Weeks. He was an immigrant here from Prince Edward Island, Canada. And so Weeks actually went on to become very, very famous because he was one of the few architects the latter part of the 20th century to the early part of the latter part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, who was able to successfully transition from Victorian architecture and all of its various different philosophies and forms and specific architectural interior and exterior architectural materials, transition that into California arts and crafts or mission revival architecture, and then finally into Spanish revival architecture. So many architects couldn't do that, and as a result they went by the wayside. Weeks was one of the few on the entire West Coast who was able to do so successfully, and consequently many of his residential and commercial structures still exist: Monterey, Salinas, Watsonville, Santa Cruz, and San Francisco. Well, we're doing our very best to save what we can, not being 90 proof. So first we laid the foundation, put in all of the infrastructure, water, sewer lines, and whatnot. And then a few years go by, we put up 3 walls and a very simple roof. A few more years go by, we did additional improvements, and finally by 2005 we were completely enclosed. I should note that quite a few, there are some very sad case studies out there of cultural or historical institutions that have had to have it all at once. Consequently, they take out loans. Sometimes loans can't be repaid. Cultural and historical organizations go defunct as a result of that. So again, for us, the road has been long, but it's been well worth it. And people ask me, can you project with regard to when you think all of this will be done? It would be very difficult for me to prognosticate. My answer to them every single time is that this has always been a community project and will be finished at the will of the community. So please come on in. Please do let your eyes adjust because we do not have electricity in here yet. So I think what we'll do, I propose we just simply take a turn. We'll go to the archaeological repository. Along the way, I will point out some of our larger artifacts. So please note that we do have, you'll see orange cones on the floor, courtesy of Ruben, who purchased them. These actually are covering protruding rebar. Okay, so just watch your step. Stay close to me, and you'll be just fine. So this is our future museum. All right, now the ground floor will be 12,500 square feet, and mezzanine space equivalent about 6,000 square feet as well. The mezzanine space being utilized for light density storage. So on our way to the archaeological repository, I'd just like to direct your attention to certain artifacts that we have. First, the 1897 Surrey buggy, which was used by the first female physician in southern Monterey County.
What year is that?
1897. And of course, this specimen right here is a commercial coffee grinder, actually made in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1873.
Do you know how many cups of coffee you can make with it?
So coming along this way, you'll see, of course, quite a few agricultural implements dating all the way back to the 1890s. Actually, no, I correct myself. We have a beautiful hay wagon in the far right-hand corner there from 1870 as well. And also, you'll see that very large wooden contraption over there. That is a bean thresher. So that actually comes from a time before we had modern day irrigation like we have today. We used to do dry land farming. And so that machine, my understanding is there are only 3 of those in existence in the entire state at this point. And those would have been responsible for separating the bean pods from the stalks. We have this really nice water tanker right here. This is a Studebaker water tanker from 1901. And this would have been used to bring fresh drinking water to those who were laboring in the sugar beet fields close to Spreckles. Everything has an amazing story, but also everything is very interconnected. For example, we talk about finishing this museum. Well, again, everything's being so interconnected. Most of that furniture will be utilized to furnish the wheat stocks. All of these agricultural implements will be utilized for our agricultural implement part. So again, in order to build, we need the space. So we need to finish certain projects before we can get to this one. You see how interconnected everything is. Okay, so interesting case study. From the 1940s to the 1980s, many museums and historical societies across America were accepting everything and anything just for the sake of growing their collection. Well, now we've come into an era where curators and directors and volunteers are looking at the collections and, again, really trying to understand what it should keep based upon its mission, based upon any given artifact's relevance to the institution's mission, as well as pertinent county or regional history.
We have to look at. We have to look and see what is the general condition of the item. Now, it looks pretty good, right? Wouldn't you all say it was? Looks pretty good, and it does. Until you get around in through here, and then you have this kind of stuff.
Somebody smoked cigarettes.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Actually, I think that's rat urine.
Oh.
oh, isn't that special? Look at that. Well, first of all, we don't have an identifying number on this, so we don't really know who gave it to us. That's number one. Secondly, it looks like it's in pretty good condition, but you have to look from top to bottom, and then you see that unfortunately, there's this kind of stuff going on. So probably we will not keep this.
Textile collections are very expensive to maintain. So this particular textile collection, one of the former executive director decided that this collection would go into an off-site storage facility. Well, that proved. Gary Brischini, who was one of the former board presidents of the Monterey County Historical Society, was an exceptionally well-noted archaeologist in the region for the last 40 years. And you're seeing, again, over 40 years of archaeological reconnaissance and excavation collecting, and curated rather well. As a matter of fact, they ended up winning the John Peabody Harrington Award for archaeological curation. And I'll just direct your attention. Here is a box right here. Showing you the catalogs, description of items, provenience, information about the specific the specific quadrants and specific archaeological site locations, along with the artifacts themselves, specifically double bagged in thick mill polypropylene bags, use of graphite instead of ink, which insects will get to actually, foil back labels, acid free ink. Now, Monterey County Historical Society has also been designated by Caltrans as one of the official, as really the official repository for archaeological specimens found specifically in the county of Monterey during road work and excavation projects. So we have well over 400 lineal feet of archaeological materials here, collected as far north as Point Año Nuevo and as far south as Mission La, and I always get this,
La Purísima. Oh no.
Thank you, sir.
You're
La
talking
Purísima.
south,
Yes,
right?
sir.
Yeah, La Purísima Concepción.
Yes, yes. It's an amazing collection. And if you just, before we leave, if you just simply want to take a peek behind the corner, to the left, you'll see again the collection is rather extensive.
Is this the plan too?
This is a very, very nice. Actually, it's more like a hybrid between a murder and a see, do you remember when you told me how they had it? So, yes, this is like a combination, more like an attack. So, your action would have been this way
Okay.
instead of this, which would have been this
Yeah.
and around.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, 1438. 1438. Site 1438. I believe that is the site of all of the excavation and groundwork they did to extend the Monterey Airport runway, if my memory serves me right. So this is what we call a portal. And so in order for an estate to be settled and go through probate, again, the probate process can be very short or long depending on how well the paperwork was done and whether or not the family gets along during that process or not. So, but every single estate can have anywhere from 6 to 100 instruments, or otherwise known as documents. So we have all of the legal instruments for every single estate probated from 1850 through 1912. We also have certain corporate collections as well, including the First National Bank of Salinas collection. Oh, also we have the orders for the Board of Supervisors from 1913 through 1955. We have also the Spreckle Sugar Company corporate collection. The Spreckle Sugar Refinery being the largest kind of its, the largest of its kind in the world for the first 50 years of its existence, actually. We'll end up going back this way, but we're going to take a little tour to our most recent vault that we just built not too long ago. Please come on in. Lights turn right on.
Wow. Everything has a different smell.
Need some water or something? Should get you. You okay?
I did so much talking last night, I think it's catching up with me. So this is, this vault we actually erected not too long ago, and it has an interesting story. So in the latter part of 2007, I did an average analysis with regard to what the Historical Society had received since its inception in 1933. Average analysis of the volume of materials coming in 1933 through 2007 in order to forecast how long it would take for us to be over capacity in the first vault that we constructed in 1980. Very chilling. I figured out by the latter part of 2008, based on my analysis, we would be well over 110% capacity. I approached the board, stated, we're really going to have to start asserting ourselves with regard to community fundraising so we can build another vault. And this is the reason why. Okay, so the former board and my predecessor decided in those days that they would actually simply replicate the cinder block, the 1980 cinder block vault. Well, by early 2014, we'd only managed to raise about $82,000, keeping in mind that brick and mortar grants are very, very difficult to secure. Okay, so we started looking for alternative solutions. Now it's amazing. When you throw something out there into eternity, into consciousness, how it can actually come back and answer you. Shortly thereafter, we were approached by a contractor who stated, we know that you're looking to build a cinder block vault, but we have an alternative solution we think you might find ideal. So they gave me the building and material specs for this heirloom seed storage vault. And through some research, I actually came to the conclusion fairly quickly that not only would this be a good solution, it would be an ideal solution and better solution than to actually replicate our cinder block vault. Particularly with regard to, again, the building materials utilized and how that lends itself to very tight encapsulation of the environment. So, for example, we have a temperature and humidity control system in there, which costs quite a bit of money to run. Here, there is negligible variation in temperature and humidity in here. So we don't even have to spend money to keep this environment just the way it is. It stays like this year round. Yeah. So,
Is it just because of the metal siding?
metal siding and the actual particular kind of foam behind the metal siding. So we're talking very thick foam panels.
It keeps it cold and, you know.
Cold and dry.
Yes.
Yes.
What about the fire suppression system?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So one of my pride and joy of this place is our FM 200 dry fire suppression system. Let me show you where it's at. So again, you know, here we are, and then this is the system I was talking to you about. So this is a dry fire suppression system. This system here is responsible for displacing 100% of the oxygen in the air in under 50 seconds.
Oh, wow.
So you could trap someone in here and just turn them into an artifact if you want.
Well,
Oh God, we do have a stop button right by the door. So anyway,
That's good.
these things they have like triple redundancy built in, so they won't go off unless the
Right,
real
yeah.
deal is happening.
50 seconds, you said?
50 seconds. Given the fact that this is the space in here is approximately 1,250 square feet, little smaller than the vault we were just in.
That's so cool. I didn't even know schools that existed.
Do you guys have any information about that?
You mean what kind of information?
Just like where any of them might have originated from?
Oh, most
who might
certainly,
have
of
given
course.
to you guys?
Oh yes. So the history of that collection, we can go back this way.
We'll probably go into more detail maybe another time. But I was thinking it'd be really cool to be able to take some like nice photographs of those and feature
You
them.
can come this way.
I can see through this thing.
All of the quite a few bound editions of Monterey Peninsula and Salinas newspapers, various ephemera and booklets associated with not only regional history but state history as well. All of the probate minute books here. And then this way, coming around this corner here, I'll just leave this a drawer. We have every single court case file, every single civil and criminal court case file from 1850 through 1912 as well.
That's neat.
Here again, various collections associated with clubs that have now that were very once important for the civics and development of the region, now long defunct. And of course, again, all of these boxes represent civil and criminal case files. And here is our institutional reference collection. Every institution like ours has something like this. So top subject, topic file, surname files, relating everything from industry and commerce to the development of various crops in the county, to various families that have helped not only Salinas Valley, but Monterey County, Monterey Peninsula, in the way of industry and commerce as well. So, and then of course, I think before I entertain any Q&A, this is the Grinstead White Collection. So Grinstead started his photography firm here in the valley in 1932. They were pioneers also in aerial imagery, for the most part commencing in the latter part of the 1940s, early part of the 1950s, through when they closed down in 2008. So in 2009, we received their institutional collection, over 50,000 photographic negatives, probably upwards of 70. We have an index on recipe cards, as it were, typed and whatnot. But Robert has already ascertained that this index is woefully, it's woefully unrepresentative of what really is going on here. So what's going on here? You have negatives that document not only show family portraits, but also document agricultural crop experimentation, new businesses going up. But very interesting is the aerial photograph part of the collection, because it shows you from afar, or from above, the development of various towns throughout the county of Monterey. You can see through the years how subdivisions going up and the sprawl that eventually happened. Very fascinating. So.
And what was the name of the
Grinstead White Collection.
Grinstead White?
The keystone collection of the Monterey County Historical Society is known as the Spanish Colonial and Mexican Republic Archives. It is a 16-volume set that was a 10-year project collecting governmental documents from all of, so again, Spanish colonial government, the Mexican Republic era government, early California government, up until 1849. Again, these are civil and criminal documents entreating upon every different subject that you can possibly imagine. So spread throughout 16 volumes are approximately 20,000 documents that were very tightly bound in 1859. So presently the state library has those documents and they'll be digitizing them. So 1771 through 1849. So there is a program called California Revealed, and the California Revealed, which is sponsored by both federal and state money, is responsible for digitizing certain very important community record series, in addition to specifically local and regionally specific sound recordings as well. Those are their priorities these days. So for the state to be doing what it's doing for the Historical Society, you can imagine how much that is costing, well, not the state, it's costing us. But anyway, it needs to be done for the purposes of access. So, plus, once it's all digitized, only on very, very rare occasions and only on very rare, compelling occasions will someone actually be ever able to handle the original document.